Imagine standing on the shores of Long Island, looking across the vast expanse of the Long Island Sound toward the Connecticut coastline. To get there right now, you have two choices. You can either sit in soul-crushing traffic for 3 hours, fighting your way through the congested heart of New York City and the Bronx, or you can wait for a slow-moving ferry that might not even have space for your car. But what if there was a third option? What if a massive, $55 billion megaproject could bridge that gap in just 15 minutes? We are talking about one of the most ambitious, controversial, and expensive infrastructure dreams in American history. A plan to finally connect Long Island and Connecticut with a masterwork of engineering that would dwarf almost any other bridge or tunnel on the planet. This isn't just a local road project. This is a battle of logistics, gargantuan budgets, and environmental high stakes that has been simmering for nearly a century. Today we are diving deep into the blueprints, the massive engineering hurdles, and the political firestorm surrounding New York's $55 billion plan to change the face of the Northeast forever. To understand why this project is such a big deal, you first have to understand the unique geographical trap that is Long Island. With over 8 million residents, if Long Island were its own state, it would be the 13th most populous in the country. Yet it operates like a giant cul-de-sac. Every single piece of bread, every gallon of fuel, and every commuter trying to leave the island toward the north or east has to funnel through the bottlenecks of New York City. This creates a logistical nightmare that costs billions in lost productivity and wasted fuel every single year. For decades, planners have looked at the Long Island Sound and seen a massive missed opportunity. They see a gap that, if closed, would bypass the entire metropolitan nightmare and create a direct corridor for trade and travel between the Mid-Atlantic and New England. The $55 billion figure isn't just a placeholder. It represents the estimated cost of a project so complex it would require technologies that push the boundaries of modern civil engineering. There have been several proposed routes over the years, but the most prominent ones involve connecting Oyster Bay on Long Island to Rye and Westchester, or the even more ambitious eastern crossing from Wading River to New Haven. We aren't just talking about a simple bridge, because the Long Island Sound is a vital waterway for shipping and a sensitive ecological zone. A traditional bridge isn't always the best answer. A combination of massive suspension bridges and deep-sea tunnels, similar to the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, but on a much larger and more technologically advanced scale. Let's talk about the engineering of the tunnel portion. Building a tunnel under the Long Island Sound would require some of the largest tunnel boring machines ever constructed. These machines, as long as several football fields, would have to chew through varying layers of glacial till, silt, and solid rock deep beneath the seabed, which are relatively short. A sound crossing could be anywhere from 8 to 18 miles long. This presents massive challenges for ventilation, fire safety, and emergency evacuation. Engineers would need to construct artificial islands in the middle of the sound to serve as ventilation shafts and staging areas, creating entirely new landmasses in the process. The bridge sections would be equally staggering. To allow for the passage of massive cargo ships and military vessels, the spans would need to be incredibly high and wide. We are talking about suspension towers that could rival the height of New York City skyscrapers. These structures would have to be anchored in deep water, requiring massive caissons to be sunk into the seabed, a process that is both incredibly expensive and technically risky. The environmental impact of placing these massive pillars in a tidal estuary is one of the primary reasons the project has faced such fierce opposition from conservation groups. But why $55 billion? When you look at the breakdown of a megaproject of this scale, the costs start to spiral quickly. First, you have the raw materials, millions of tons of high-performance concrete and specialized structural steel. Then there is the labor, thousands of high-skilled workers, engineers, and divers working in hazardous conditions for over a decade. But a huge chunk of that budget actually goes toward land acquisition and environmental mitigation. Long Island and coastal Connecticut are home to some of the most expensive real estate in the world. Buying the rights of way to connect the bridge or tunnel to existing highways means moving through wealthy suburbs where a single acre can cost millions. The political history of this project is a roller coaster of grand visions and crushing defeats. The dream started in earnest with Robert Moses, the legendary and polarizing master builder of New York. Moses wanted a bridge across the Sound to complete his vision of an interconnected highway system. In the 1960s and 70s, he pushed hard for an Oyster Bay Rye Bridge. He saw it as the final piece of the puzzle, However, he met his match in a coalition of local residents and environmentalists who didn't want a massive highway cutting through their quiet, wealthy neighborhoods. This was one of the few times Moses actually lost a fight, and the project was shelved for decades. Fast forward to the 21st century, and the traffic problem has only worsened. The idea was revived by former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who commissioned new studies to look at the feasibility of a tunnel-only option. By going underground, planners hoped to avoid the aesthetic and noise complaints that killed the bridge proposals of the past. A tunnel would effectively be invisible to the residents on the shores, appearing only as a portal several miles inland near major existing highways like the Long Island Expressway and I-95. But the price tag for a tunnel is nearly double that of a bridge, leading us to that astronomical $55 billion estimate. Let's look at the logistical benefits. If this link were built, it would transform the entire regional economy. Currently, a truck traveling from a warehouse in central Long Island to a store in Boston has to fight through the Cross Bronx Expressway, arguably the most congested road in America. With a sound crossing, that truck could bypass New York City entirely, shaving hours off the trip. This would lead to lower shipping costs, fresher produce, and a more resilient supply chain. For the millions of people living on the island, it would mean the freedom to travel north without checking a traffic app 3 hours in advance. It would turn Long Island from a dead end into a gateway. However, the criticisms are just as massive as the project itself. Beyond the cost, many urban planners argue that building more highways only leads to induced demand. This is the idea that if you build more lanes, more people will choose to drive. And within a few years, the new bridge will be just as congested as the old routes. Critics suggest that the $55 billion would be better spent on massive upgrades to the Long Island Railroad and the Metro North, creating a high-speed rail link that could move people across the Sound without adding more cars to the road. There has even been talk of a rail-only tunnel, which would be smaller and cheaper, but would still bridge the geographical gap. Then there is the environmental perspective. The Long Island Sound is a unique ecosystem, home to diverse marine life and vital for local fishing and recreation. Constructing massive towers or digging deep tunnels would stir up decades of sediment, potentially releasing pollutants into the water column. The artificial islands required for ventilation could alter tidal currents and impact the migration patterns of fish and birds. For many who live on the Sound, the water isn't just a barrier to be crossed, it's a sanctuary to be protected. This cultural clash between those who want progress and those who want preservation is the core reason the project remains in a state of perpetual planning. But imagine for a moment that the project gets the green light. The construction phase would be one of the greatest engineering spectacles on Earth. We would see a fleet of specialized barges, floating factories capable of mixing concrete on-site, and giant cranes that can lift entire bridge sections into place. The tunnel boring machines would be custom-built monsters, designed specifically for the unique geology of the Sound. It would be a decade of 24-hour-a-day labor, creating a temporary city of workers and industrial equipment on the water. The project would also require a massive redesign of the regional power grid. A tunnel of that length requires an incredible amount of electricity for lighting, pumping systems to remove water, and most importantly, ventilation fans that can move massive volumes of air to keep the tunnel safe for drivers. Designers would likely need to build dedicated power substations just to handle the load of the crossing. There is even a proposal to include high-voltage transmission lines and fiber-optic cables within the bridge or tunnel structure, making it a vital piece of energy and data infrastructure as well as a road. One of the most fascinating engineering options being discussed is an immersed tube tunnel. Instead of boring through the rock, builders would dredge a trench on the seafloor. Then, massive precast concrete sections would be floated out on barges, sunk into the trench, and joined together underwater. This is the method used for many of the world's most successful underwater crossings. It can be faster and sometimes cheaper than boring, but it is highly disruptive to the seabed. In a place like the Long Island Sound, where the water is relatively shallow in many areas, this could be a viable, albeit controversial, option. The financial side of the $55 billion is a mega project of its own. How do you pay for a bridge that costs more than the annual budget of some countries? The most likely scenario is a public-private partnership, where a private consortium covers a portion of the construction costs in exchange for the rights to collect tolls for 30 or 50 years. Given the high volume of traffic, the tolls would be significant. likely exceeding $50 or even $100 for a round trip. While that sounds expensive, for a trucking company saving 4 hours of time and fuel, it's a bargain. The project would become a massive cash flow engine, eventually paying for itself over several decades. A link of this importance would be a critical piece of national infrastructure. It would require state-of-the-art surveillance, blast-resistant designs, and a dedicated security force to monitor the crossing 24 hours a day. In the post-9/11 world, building a mega-project in the New York metropolitan area comes with a massive layer of security requirements that add billions to the final cost. Every inch of the structure would be monitored by sensors designed to detect everything from structural shifts to unauthorized intruders. As we look at the current state of the plan, it remains a dream on paper, but a dream that refuses to die. Every few years, as traffic on the Throgs Neck and Whitestone bridges reaches a breaking point, a new politician or business group brings up the sound crossing. They point to the fact that other parts of the world are building even longer and deeper crossings. China, for instance, has completed several projects of this scale in the last decade. Proponents ask why the United States, and specifically the wealthiest region in the country, can't manage to build a vital link that has been needed for 80 years. The opposition, however, is equally persistent. They argue that the era of massive highway projects is over. They point to the need for climate-resilient infrastructure and the push toward green energy. They ask if we should really be spending $55 billion to encourage more gas-powered vehicles to drive more miles. This debate isn't just about a bridge. It's about the future of how we live and move in the Northeast. Is our future one of more roads and cars? Or is it one of high-speed rail and reduced carbon footprints? One interesting compromise that has surfaced recently is a bridge or tunnel that is strictly for rail and autonomous electric shuttles. This would reduce the size and cost of the crossing while still providing a high-capacity link for people and goods. By banning traditional combustion engine trucks and cars, the ventilation requirements would be drastically reduced, and the environmental impact could be minimized. This high-tech vision for the sound crossing could be the key to winning over some of the project's skeptics. But let's not forget the sheer human scale of the people involved. For a commuter on Long Island, this project represents the hope of getting home in time to see their kids' soccer game instead of sitting in gridlock on the Long Island Expressway. For a business owner in Connecticut, it means access to a massive new pool of customers and workers. For the engineers, it's the challenge of a lifetime, a chance to build a monument that will last for a century. Infrastructure is at its heart about the people it serves. The engineering hurdles are matched by the bureaucratic ones. A project like this would require approvals from dozens of local, state, and federal agencies. It would involve the Army Corps of Engineers, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Coast Guard, and the Departments of Transportation for 2 different states. Navigating this labyrinth of regulations can take as long as the construction itself. This soft cost of planning and permitting is a major contributor to the $55 billion price tag. Each year of delay adds hundreds of millions in inflationary costs for materials and labor. When you compare the Long Island Sound crossing to other global megaprojects, the scale becomes even clearer. The Channel Tunnel connecting the UK and France was a similar feat of engineering and finance, and it has fundamentally changed the relationship between those two regions. The Øresund Bridge between Denmark and Sweden created a single integrated economic zone where 2 separate regions once existed. Proponents of the New York-Connecticut link argue that the Long Island Sound is currently a moat that divides 2 economies that should be one. By building the crossing, we would be creating a Northeast megalopolis that is more efficient and competitive on a global scale. Let's imagine the view from the top of the bridge portion of this project. You would be hundreds of feet above the water, looking out over one of the most beautiful coastlines in the world. To the west, the skyline of Manhattan might be visible on a clear day. To the east, the endless Atlantic. It would be an architectural icon, a landmark that would be recognized around the world. Something that New Yorkers can be proud of, similar to the Brooklyn Bridge or the George Washington Bridge. But the reality of $55 billion also means that the project could suck all the oxygen out of the room for other necessary repairs. New York City's subways are over a century old and in desperate need of billions in investment. The bridges and tunnels that already exist are aging and require constant maintenance. Critics wonder if we can afford to build a shiny new toy when the old ones are falling apart. It's a classic dilemma of infrastructure investment. the tension between maintaining the past and building the future. Recent technological advancements might actually help lower the cost or increase the feasibility. New types of ultra-high-performance concrete and carbon fiber reinforced polymers could allow for longer spans with less material. Autonomous underwater vehicles can now perform inspections and some construction tasks that used to require human divers in dangerous conditions. Advanced AI can optimize the design of the tunnel's ventilation system to be more efficient. While the project is decades old in concept, the version built today would be a marvel of 21st century tech. The geology of the Sound is a story of the last ice age. Glaciers carved out the trench and left behind a complex mix of boulders and soft sediments. This makes the seabed a mixed face for tunneling, which is the most difficult situation for a tunnel boring machine. The machine has to be able to grind through a massive granite boulder 1 minute, and then navigate through soft, watery silt the next. This requires a hybrid TBM, a machine that can change its operating mode on the fly. Only a handful of these exist in the world, and they are custom-made for each project. Another factor to consider is the impact on the existing ferry services. The Bridgeport-Port Jefferson Ferry and the Cross Sound Ferry have been the primary links for generations. These companies are vital local employers and part of the coastal culture. A bridge or tunnel would likely put them out of business. This adds another layer of local economic concern and political resistance. Any plan for a fixed link would need to consider how to transition these workers and companies into the new regional transportation system. As we look at the $55 billion plan, we have to recognize that the price of doing nothing is also incredibly high. Every year that passes without a solution adds to the cost of congestion, pollution, and lost economic opportunity. If we don't build a link, the traffic on the existing bridges will eventually reach a point of total failure, where the region's economy begins to contract because it simply cannot move people and goods efficiently. The do-nothing option isn't free. Its cost is just hidden in higher grocery prices and longer commutes. This is a project that tests our collective will. Do we still have the ability to build big things in the United States? The interstate highway system and the great dams of the mid-20th century were built with a sense of national purpose. Today, our projects are often bogged down in years of litigation and political infighting. The Long Island Sound crossing is the ultimate test case for whether we can still execute a vision of this magnitude. The project also has implications for disaster recovery. If a major storm or incident were to take out one of the major bridges in New York City, Long Island would be almost completely cut off from the rest of the continent. A crossing at the eastern end, or even in the middle of the Sound, provides a vital redundancy, a plan B for the region's survival. This aspect of national security and regional resilience is often a key argument used by those pushing for the federal government to step in and provide funding. In the end, the $55 billion plan to connect Long Island and Connecticut remains one of the most fascinating what-ifs in the world of megaprojects. It sits at the intersection of engineering genius, economic necessity, and intense social and environmental debate. Whether it is ever built or remains a blueprint in a dusty office in Albany, it represents the scale of the challenges we face in our aging, crowded metropolitan areas. It's a dream of a 15-minute trip across a blue expanse, a dream of bypassing the gridlock, and a dream of finally finishing the work that Moses started nearly a century ago. If the project ever moves forward, it will be the construction story of the century. The world's eyes would be on the Sound, watching as the towers rise and the machines burrow deep. It would be a testament to our desire to overcome the barriers of geography and to connect our communities more closely. For now, the ferry still sails, the bridge traffic still crawls, and the dream of the Sound crossing waits for the right moment, the right leader, and the right $55 billion. The Long Island Sound is a quiet place at night. The water is calm, and the lights of the distant shore twinkle. It's hard to imagine the sheer industrial power that would be required to span this gap. But when you're sitting in the third hour of a traffic jam in the Bronx, trying to get home to Long Island on a Friday night, that massive engineering project doesn't seem like a luxury or an environmental threat. It seems like the only logical solution to a problem that has outgrown our current infrastructure. As we continue to monitor the progress of New York's regional planning, the Sound crossing will always be the elephant in the room. It's the one project that could truly solve the island's isolation. Whether it's called a Sound Link, a cross-Sound bridge, or a bypass tunnel, the The core mission remains the same: to break the geographical trap and open a new chapter for the Northeast. It's a $55 billion question that New York and Connecticut will eventually have to answer. The engineering world is ready. The technology is there. The economic case is stronger than ever. All that remains is the political courage and the public consensus to take the leap and build into the blue. Until then, keep an eye on the horizons of Oyster Bay and New Haven. One day you might see the first barges arrive, signaled by the arrival of the most ambitious megaproject in a generation. The Long Island Connecticut link is a journey that began 100 years ago and is still searching for its destination. This project reminds us that the world is built by those who dare to propose the impossible. Even if this specific $55 billion plan never breaks ground, the ideas it generates and the engineering solutions it proposes will influence the next generation of builders. Every study conducted and every model built prepares us for the day when we finally decide to close the gap. The Sound is a wide, beautiful barrier, but history shows that where there is a need, humans will eventually find a way to build a bridge. Think of the sheer amount of steel and concrete that $55 billion buys. Think of the miles of tunnel and the height of the towers. Most of all, think of the change it would bring to the lives of 8 million people. It's not just about getting from point A to point B, it's about reimagining an entire region of the world. And the stakes couldn't be higher. Whether it succeeds or remains a dream, it is a mega project in every sense of the word, a testament to our enduring desire to build something great, something lasting, and something that connects us all.